and I am hoping that you can see my slides as well. So, thank you for coming to my talk. My name is Jose Joaquin Atria, and I normally go online by JJ Atria. That's in most places. So, and that's my website there, in case you need to contact me. Um, so my talk is called Traipsing through Rakuland, and unsurprisingly, I'll be talking about Rakuland. A little bit of housekeeping. These slides that I'm showing are available online at that URL. I can share this link also on the chat. And the site itself um, that I'm going to be talking about is Rakuland. We also have an IRC channel on Libera Chat, which is raku-land, in case you want to join in for just to have a chat or ask questions or additional comments if you're interested. So we're a friendly bunch. Just drop in. So we built a Raku website. That's the core topic of this talk. By which I mean that we built a website using Raku. So Rakuland is integrally built using Raku. Well, I mean, there's a little bit of other, there's some make files, there's some Docker files, but the functional code in the site is all Raku. And I mean not just the site itself, but also all the tooling around it, all the code that we use for ingestion and deployment and everything. But we also built this website for Raku. So Rakuland is a browser for Raku distributions. And like I said, we've made an effort to keep all of the tools that we're using in the site as using Raku. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of what was the motivation behind that. The site refreshes itself automatically every hour. So all of the data that you see on the site is up to date to the latest hour. And in terms of sort of like the architecture of the site, all of the writes to the database, they only happen once when we ingest. So at the top of the hour, we fetch all of the information that we want. We put it into the database, and from that point on, the website is just read only. It's like, in essence, it's a static site. And we've made some efforts in the site to have short, arguably pretty URLs that we can share, and you'll see some examples of those URLs in the talk. I've been using the plural in this so far because Rakuland is primarily a team effort. I'm doing the talk, but a lot of the actual work has been done by James Raspas, who you might know from other successful websites like Code Golf, which explains possibly why we decided to write a website, since there's a lot of experience there. But why did we do it? The main reason is possibly that we wanted to use Raku in anger. We wanted to really use it. We love Raku, we love using it, but we're often faced with this question: Is Raku ready for production? And it's a weird question to handle because people are not going to pay you to put Raku in production unless you can answer the question, but you can't answer the question until you put it in production and test it. So we decided that we were going to do it ourselves. Because even if you know that Raku can be used in production in theory or by other people, you don't know whether you can do it. So we wanted to see whether we could do it. We wanted to see how it would look to build a website in Raku. Part of that was also to try some of the technologies that have been developed by others like Crow, or some of the database handling modules that we had never had a chance to use. Certainly not when there's actual data behind them. but also some of the tools that we ourselves had written. James works on a TOML parser. I have an HTTP client library. I also wrote that app Lorea, which is a tool to execute commands on file system changes, and we try to use these libraries in the code um, to solve specific real problems, and also to see how those libraries behave when we put them to the task. And all of these libraries have seen improvements because of us using them in the real world, in a sense. And we've also pushed fixes to other, or contributions to other libraries as well. Um, we also wanted to build something that would be useful. Even though we wanted to try these things out, we didn't want to build something that would just, linger in some dark corner of the internet. We wanted something that we could build and put out there and for people to use. Uh, and it's important for us that whatever we're building is useful to the community. Um, and James has a knack to identify needs that can be solved by simple websites. So again, that explains probably some of the rationale behind this. We also wanted a website that was easy to try things out with, to hack with, in part because we weren't really sure what sort of problems we would have, or uh, what sort of tools we would like to try. We wanted something that we could just jump in and do. Which meant that that it would help if the code base was small and familiar and relatively straightforward. So that explains partly why the code in Rakuland has been to whatever extent is possible. We've tried to keep it relatively small, no nonsense code in a sense. Now, the obvious question is, well, we already have a distribution browser in Raku, in the Raku landscape, modules.raku.org. And I'll say that we did not set out when writing Rakuland to compete with modules.raku.org. The project with Rakuland, like I said, was mostly for us to have a test bed where we could put these ideas to the test. And as good as modules.raku.org is, it didn't quite meet our desires. It wasn't written in Raku. It's not particularly easy to just jump in and try new things with, and it's not really what we were after. So we wanted to come up with some niche that we could fulfill, and we figured that this was as good a test case as any. So I'll take you through a little tour of what the website looks like, and what sort of things you can do with it. This is, of course, a work in progress. There's a lot of things that we're still working on, but this is what it currently looks like. If you go to the website right now, this is what you'll see: a landing page with information about some of the distributions. You'll have some additional lists of popular distributions or productive authors on the right. And of course, there's a search bar at the top. The URLs for the search are as straightforward as we could make them. And we tokenize distribution names using Postgres, which means that if you search for something like math vector, you will get the results that you expect. We also do autocomplete on distribution names, which means that often you don't actually have to run a search to find the module that you're looking for. If you actually go to distribution, you'll have a distribution page that will have some information about the author and metadata about the distribution. And we also render the README and the changes for the distribution. Most of the metadata that we have for the distribution, we try to parse from the meta-JSON whenever possible. That is our source of truth for everything in the site. We read the stars for the distributions from GitHub and GitLab at the moment. Adding more sources is possible. but we can't actually have an internal measure of favorites or likes for distributions because, like I said, this is in essence a static website. And we do render the README and the changelog if the distribution provides it. Um, we make a best effort to render it properly. We also have a author page where we display the distributions of that author. The metadata for the author comes from FES Meta, which is so we integrate with this external tool. And like all of these other pages that I've been showing, this is paginated, and we show the same sort of like the list of tags for the distributions and release dates and stars and all the obvious things. The tags, we have a tag page as well, and the tags are also parsed from the meta.json. We normalize them internally, which is something that modules.raku.org also does. And we try to show only the tags that we consider to be meaningful. And by that, currently, we mean tags that are used by at least 2 distributions from different authors. And modules.raku.org also does some of this. So in this sense, this process is similar. We have a page with recent releases as well, which is as close as we're currently getting to something that can be easily processed by third parties. So and this is when we start getting to the wish list for the site. There are other pages in the site, but I'll let you discover them yourselves. But we have a long list of things that we want to do with the website, which we haven't actually done, more because we lack resources than because we lack ideas. In particular, we want to expose more of the information that we have in the database. We collect a lot of information about the distributions, including dependencies and reverse dependencies, but we don't actually have an interface to currently display that data. And although we are working on having an API that can expose that data, we don't currently have it. We also don't have a way to render the source code or the rest of the documentation in the distribution. But all of these things are things that we're working on, and that we're basically making all the effort that we can to bring about. And in fact, some of the features that I've mentioned just now, like autocompletes or tag pages, were implemented recently, in part because of community feedback. This is, by the way, a really long list. And these are just the ones that I could think of. But that is also only part of the story. So while we were building this site, we were forced, because of this core idea that we had, that we wanted to use Raku whenever possible. We came across a bunch of oh, I just saw that on the chat. Somebody has a dependency graph generator. Excellent. We should be able to use that. That would be great. I think the bigger question there is, how do we render on the page? But I guess we'll get to that. In any case, while working on Rakuland, we had a lot of, we bumped into a lot of, well, some of them were problems, but I guess I wanted to discuss some of these lessons that we learned while working with Raku in a real world scenario. First of all, Raku is a new language, and you can tell that it's new because it's rough around the edges in some aspects. There are some things that we have expected to see more developed, that we were a little frustrated at times to find that that we were not quite there yet. Syntax highlighting, for example, was one of those things that we're currently using a custom version of Rouge, which is Ruby. Nothing against Ruby, but we couldn't find like a tool to do the sort of syntax highlighting that we wanted. And markdown parsing as well was also something that that was not as straightforward to use as we initially anticipated. And when thinking about deploying a website on production, one of the things that you try to do is to pin your dependencies. And likewise, we couldn't find a way to pin all of your dependencies, not just your direct dependencies, but also your indirect dependencies, like you would normally do with a log file or a snapshot or something like that. And if you're thinking about deploying something, in a production environment, something like that might be a real hurdle. Um, Interestingly, even though Raku is a new language, it's a new language with a long history. And with that long history comes a big baggage. Um, there are a lot of, and this is more evident to us because we've been working with distributions. We've been trying to catalog and index all of the distributions that are available through the various ecosystems. And that means having to deal with a lot of legacy code, and a lot of abandoned code as well. So every time we come across a meta file that is incomplete, or some license that is not using the standard name or something like that, we realize that that needs to be fixed. And if the distribution is abandoned, uh, or the author is unreachable, or they've moved on from Raku, that is difficult to do. Um, to some extent, this is something that like all languages will have to deal with, but it's a little bit of a disconnect when you realize, oh, Raku is new, but it's also quite old. Like, it's not old, but it's a new language with a long history. Um, Also related to our specific problem space, Raku allows a lot of versatility. So for example, just in the packaging model, you have the notion of ecosystems that can coexist, one next to the other. Um, we currently have three different ecosystems. We have P6C, we have CPAN, and we have Ceph. And actually, Ceph became kind of publicly available after we started working on Rakuland. Um, and this, even though this provides a lot of power for the authors and for users, because it allows users to, for example, um, you know, have several versions of the same distribution installed in their systems and loaded lexically in different parts of their code. That is very powerful, but it means that for us, um, there's a lot of questions that are hard to answer. Like, for example, how do we disambiguate distributions? What does it mean to render a distribution by an author when that same author can have released in different ecosystems, or even in the same ecosystem, different incompatible versions of the same distribution? Um, Um, Related to that versatility, Raku is extremely powerful. And some of the tools that are at our disposal is have made working with Raku extremely pleasurable. It's just been fun, and a lot of times we've had tools or pieces of code that we have used in other scenarios, and we have to port over to Raku. We realize that it's just very convenient to use. We started on this project because we love Raku, and if anything, we like it more now. Um, in part because Raku is truly optimized for fun. It's just really enjoyable to use, and despite all of the hurdles that we've found, uh, we just really enjoy using it. And I think that's something that we should feel proud of. Uh, so thank you. In answer to the initial question, is Raku ready for production? I guess the answer, as in everything, is it depends. But it's definitely a positive answer from us. It definitely works in production for us, and you can go to the website and try it for yourself. And I would encourage other people to try it for themselves as well, because the sooner we come across these real world problems using Raku, the sooner we can fix them and make things easier for everyone else. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be glad to take questions or discuss some of these lessons. Somebody did, Liz mentioned on the chat that we should, something that I agree with. She said that we should suggest using FES going forward, and we agree. It's definitely of the three ecosystems that are currently available, it's the one that is favored by Rakuland. It's where we get, it's the one that is easiest to work with for sure. And Rakuland was actually, I think, the first website that could index the distributions that were released on that. So it's definitely the one we prefer.
JJ, one question for you in terms of, you mentioned things that you found sort of missing from the ecosystem. That were there any pain points with the Raku language itself that you encountered in deploying a site to production, or was it all just sort of things that don't exist yet in the ecosystem?
Most of the code itself for the site has been written by James. So it feels to me like this would be a question that I've been doing mostly like code reviews and encouragement. But I feel like James is probably the right person to ask this question. I think
Okay.
I think looking through the code, there are a couple of places where there's comments saying, I wish there was an easier way to do this. Um, but in general, whenever we have come across a limitation like that, it's Raku itself that provides us the tools to navigate around it. There are definitely things that I think we can improve with, but in general, it's been. I don't think that the problems are with the language, but more with the things that we build with the language.
All right, thank you.
I will also, mention again, even though I've mentioned before, that we are very receptive to feedback from the community. So if there's anything, if you start using the site and you realize like, oh, this is not quite what I wanted, or this is unexpected, or this is really missing, please let us know, because we're very keen on bringing those things into fruition. And I'm starting to run out of time, so unless there's any more questions, then maybe we can leave it here.